Hey, so I should be live here now on YouTube, and this is a video that I wanted to make about creator strategy. I essentially just want to get more practice making live stream content in general, and hopefully some people come in here who can answer some questions. If you're watching the replay or you're watching some clips, please come into the live streams because I would love to answer questions for up and coming content creators or even advanced content creators. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I used to tell people, I still do, that when it comes to swimming, for example, I could teach an Olympic swimmer something new. I could train an Olympic swimmer because I just know there is some sort of angle or detail that they might be missing. And I just know that from experience from doing it for over a decade. You know, when I teach, it's more like I'm not chopping things up like an axe. I'm more of like a screwdriver, tweaking this, and this, and this. And I think with creator coaching as well, I can take that same approach. Maybe not as deep as swimming because I did swimming for longer, but coaching in general is something fun to me. And so I like doing these live streams because at the very least, I can give you information, then I can toss this video into Opus and get clips out of it. But for the most part, I do this to give you an opportunity to come in and come say hi. So content creator strategy is what the premise of this video is about today. And I'm actually working on a few different posts ahead of time for my Substack, which in turn also goes to this channel. And so it's interesting to think about what the strategy I'm employing is, the topic of what these posts I'm working on right now, which is the creator equation, something I came up with for content creators to accelerate their growth, and what I plan to do with that down the line. So each one of my content bubbles, whether it's the gaming, the swimming, the content creation, or even my holistic knowledge management for Polymath, they all have a big project that really kind of culminates what I've taught in the free content, but into the actual main deep portion, if you will. Whether that's a book, a course, maybe a mini course, or a downloadable, thing for Notion, template. Whether it's a downloadable template, whatever it might have been, I created something or I'm creating something for each brand. And so for the content creator brand, I am going to write a book. I started kind of outlining it already, but I need to finish my exercise and swimming books first. I have that as a priority. But I really want to create a book, particularly around content creation, but I think I'm going to really anchor down and focus on the creator equation. So before I get going into it, I'm going to explain what that is. You have strategy plus automation times execution equals success. That is the creator equation. I came up with this in order to really understand why I was struggling at times, but then if I'm struggling at it, I know other people are as well, because I tried to be as strategic as possible when it came to my content production. I tried to maximize how many platforms I'm on at the least amount of the least amount of effort when it comes to how do I get on Pinterest, for example, or how do I get on LinkedIn, and etc. So this idea that you can create content across the board effectively is not something you can do right off the bat, but I want to try to help you accelerate to getting to that point. A lot of content creators do not explain what it takes to get from point A to point B. They'll tell you, make 100 posts. And I know Roberto Blake does a good job about that. And Harris Heller talks about how to make content more effectively. And I try to combine those ideas into a nice strategy. Because Gary Vee, Doc Williams, they all explain this too, but everyone's kind of explaining it in different ways. And I wanted to try to consolidate that. And so this idea of how do you create like this factory of content, and how do you get to that level of once you can churn out content like a factory? Because that's kind of like a high level. Like let's say it's level 10 out of 100 is when you could start that factory, but it's not necessarily actually a factory until that point. So levels 1 through 9, you have to actually get there. Level 1 is literally you just starting, and you can't level up until you've done a decent amount of posts. I think that you can technically get to level 2 once you get around like maybe 30 posts, and this is just me thinking out loud, but level 2 is more of just, hey, I've actually showed up for X amount of times, whether it's 30 days in a row or let's say 52 weeks, and like that's a whole different game there. Doing it for a whole year versus for a whole month. But doing 30 posts in 1 month is also very powerful at the same time. And so there's a really strong dynamic versus doing it over time and doing it in a more short succession. And in the video series that I have been batching and working on right now, I talk about that. I talk about this slow track, fast track, and super fast track to content creation. And so if you're interested on that, go check out the Substack. But the interesting thing is, when you are trying to create content over the course of time, if you want to level up, you have to make more content. And more importantly than that, what I think a lot of content creators do not understand is that you have to make more content of different types. And that's where a lot of content creators really mess up. They don't realize you need to do it in a octopus-like fashion. You need to go about making videos and blog posts and audio. Now, I'm not saying you need to go make a serialized podcast that's very much high effort, equalizing the audio and stuff like that. It can be pretty low effort if it's just cutting out the audio from your video. That's fine. And if you want to do a newsletter instead of a blog post, that's fine. I generally treat those as one as the same. As if I make a blog post, I'll send it out as a newsletter because I think that's just more interesting for the reader at this point. Just creating a little email is not really interesting. People kind of ignore that. But making an actual blog post and sending that out as a newsletter makes more sense that way. But you could basically make a newsletter that's just your personal journal, and people will probably sign up for it if they think you're interesting, right? So if they follow you as a YouTuber, they might follow your newsletter simply because they like you as a YouTuber. The podcast can literally just be the audio, maybe tweaked a little bit, or you can record better and just send that out as a podcast. In the end, it's really up to you how you want to go about doing it. But you don't necessarily have to make all three from scratch. I think a lot of creators, when I tell them you need to make all three, they kind of come from the perspective of like, hey, I'm a YouTuber, hey, I'm a writer, or hey, I'm a podcaster. And that's what they view themselves as first. They know how much effort it took to get them started on that. They think it's going to be the same with the other content types. That isn't necessarily the truth. The skill level does reset. When you switch content types, your skill level does reset. Your numbers of reps resets, yes. But you have experience at the productivity angle. Like, how do you actually get yourself to sit down and make a piece of content, right? You've already kind of practiced that. It's going to be easier for you to do a new thing because you already know how to sit down and make a piece of content. You just have to learn how to make that type of content. And so that's going to be slow at first, like any skill. Wood chopping or cleaning the house. Those are all different skills. It's going to be hard to know if you don't know what you're doing at first, right? So you have to learn those skills. Cooking too. And so if you switch from cooking to baking, they're in the same category, but they're going to be completely different in how you approach it. And so you're going to know how to, use the pans and turn on the oven, but you might not have had much experience with it in the long run. And so you might have to change how you approach baking. Like, okay, you have to actually make sure you follow the ingredients to the dot, versus with cooking, you can be a little bit more freeform. With YouTube videos, I can just kind of talk off the cuff and not worry too much about how it comes out, right? I have stuttered, I've made mistakes, but this is a live stream, so I don't have to worry about it as much. But even if I were recording this, I probably would just leave them in because they're kind of funny when I make mistakes like that. Whoever's in here, hello. I am simply just making a video about content creator strategy, and we're just talking about the creator equation. So the strategy, first and foremost, is like getting to that 100 reps per content type, but particularly just the first content type that you are working on. And then from there, moving on towards getting to the other types. Your automation is the second portion of that equation, and how you go about automating is going to be different for each person and each kind of creator. But something I was writing about today is that you don't want to over automate. You don't want to over rely. It's more like your strategy is your exercises, but the automation is your supplementation. And you're going to have to make sure you're eating enough to actually do your exercise. But if you're just trying to use supplements to replace food, it's not going to work out. You can't use automation to really replace your actual content creation. It should be more in the sense of adding on to it or filling in the gaps. Like, for example, Pinterest. I don't want to be on Pinterest, but I send every video over to, like, every video, every blog post, every podcast gets sent over to Pinterest. Every Instagram picture gets sent over to Pinterest, that kind of thing. And so it's an interesting dynamic of allowing the strategy to be your baseline, the automation to be kind of an extra piece. And then you get to the execution, which is the X factor, right? If you can have automation and strategy, you're going to be a pretty consistent growth. And that's going to be great, but it's going to take a long time, right? You're going to see that growth curve just kind of tick, 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 tick over the course of a very long period of time. But if you want those more exponential jumps and the more opportunity to go viral, then is the execution factor that's going to be the changing factor of it. And so execution is really how many reps are you putting in. So at the beginning of this live stream, I talked about how you could do a slow track, a fast track, or a super fast track. If you're making one post a week, that's going to be kind of slow, but it's going to be consistent. It's a little bit easier to focus on making that one post really good. Maybe you can make sure if you delay on one day, you can do it again another day. That's fine. But that way you can make sure you're getting it out every single week. It's also a little bit easier to batch out ahead of time because you're only doing 1 week. The next track is like, okay, let's say I'm doing 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's a lot harder, but it's still one of those things where it's pretty palatable for a lot of content creators to go ahead and do. And again, if you do 1 a week, that's 52 in a year. If you do 3 a week, that's 156 a year. That's a huge jump in how much content you're putting out. And like I said, you need to get to 100 reps to really get good at creating a certain content type. And then you have the super fast track, which is like, let's make 1 post a day. And whether you are doing that on YouTube, I feel like that's a little bit harder, but maybe you can do it with shorts or something like that. Doing 1 YouTube video a day would be really hard. I know a lot of vloggers have done it, but making educational content like this might be a little bit harder. I think that'd be a fun challenge for me to do later down the line. But now at my higher skill level, it's easier for me to do. If you're just starting out, that can be really overwhelming and lead to burnout, which in turn is not something you want to really work towards. And then doing 365 posts in a year, though, it will get you so many more opportunities to then reach out to as many more people as possible, get more eyes on your content, have more doors of entryway to your content ecosystem. And on top of that, you can get to that really high level of creating content a lot faster. And while I think that the 1 a day is great, a lot of people just will not take advantage of it well enough. I would rather you take the middle approach where you have 3 posts a week, and 1 post you're doing video, 1 post you're doing podcast, and 1 post you're doing blog post. I didn't even talk about that in the post that I was writing, because I think it's more effective to get you those skills faster that way. If you are doing 3 posts a week and it's just 1 content type, just videos, for example, that's great, and it's going to get you to that point of higher skill level faster. And then maybe down the line, you do an extra post on top of that. So not daily, but doing 4 a week, but that 4th post is now a newsletter. Cool. That's generally what I think a lot of people end up doing. A lot of content creators end up following that pathway. I don't know necessarily if newsletters or podcasts are generally something that YouTubers do first. Because you start off with YouTube or maybe live streaming, and then you are like, okay, I need to start building an email list, and you start creating email blog posts. Cool. Or you see that podcasting is blowing up, and it's also a great way to get clips and get a lot more short form content on your channel. Cool. A lot of content creators don't necessarily know how to manage having an ecosystem that big, though, because they're so used to having just 1 content type. And so whoever was viewing, thank you for being here. So this interesting dynamic of creating that content at a more effective pace is really what I was trying to go for there. I think that a lot of content creators try to overcomplicate things. And right now I'm giving a more complex strategy or a more complex understanding of what the numbers look like. But that's just because I want you to have a scale in mind, right? There is this interesting dynamic of having a baseline. Okay, you have 100 reps in video or 100 reps in podcast. That means you're going to start knowing what you did right, what you did wrong in that skill. But it really comes down to having like 300. Once you get to 300, that's when I know for a fact you're getting good. And there's some point in between where it might be different for each person. It's an interesting point. I'm going to dig into it a little bit. When I teach swimming, for example, there are people who can sink really well, and there's people who float really naturally. But everybody needs to be able to sink down. And what I tell people is when you're blowing out the air, there is a certain sinking point, and that sinking point is different for everybody. It depends on how much air you're breathing in, depends on your bone density, depends on how much fat to muscle ratio you have. And in order to be polite, I generally just tell them like, hey, you have a pretty high buoyancy or something like that. Because sometimes there's people who have a bit more fat, and so they float too much, and so it makes it harder for them to sink. But then there's people also who have more muscle, so they sink like a rock, so it actually makes it hard for them to float at all. But that sinking point, again, is different for everybody. And perhaps in between the 100 reps and 300 reps, there's a certain point where you've done enough reps to get good. But that point could be different, because it could be a lot more effective for you. If you're making 100 videos, you might have put a lot of attention into the analytics. You might have put a lot of attention into the editing, more so than I did for my first 100 reps. I did try to do editing, but I ended up kind of over editing. I ended up trying too hard at scripting and making it too formulaic. And I think that by eventually, after hundreds of reps, particularly after doing a ton of interviews, which are more off the cuff and natural anyways, I realized that doing these kind of videos where I'm just off the cuff is better for me. But it took me a lot longer than it should have, I think, when it came to how many videos I've actually put out when I finally learned that. So the dependent factor is each person is unique, sure, but I want to give you that scale so you can figure out maybe where your point is or try to get to that point as soon as possible. And again, I can't stress this enough, I really want everybody to make all three content types, because you're just missing out on too much opportunity, especially in the modern day where it's a lot easier to automate things and make it quicker to change a video into a podcast, change a video into a blog post, and that kind of thing. So from there, that's what the creator equation is all about. You have that strategy plus the automation and then times the execution that equals your success. And how you go about doing that is really up to you and how you want to put, how much effort and time you want to put into this. But that is the topic of that book that I want to write. And down the line, I would also like to speak on stages about that same topic. And I think that'd be very helpful for a lot of creators to think about it in that way. I came up with it because in my experience, there was plenty of times as a content creator where I had a great strategy, but my execution failed, or I didn't have enough tools to help me make it happen. That sounds like an excuse, but really, I really needed tools at the time, especially since I was already kind of doing too much when it came to having a day job and then trying to make content, about this other topic. Like, since I'm already spread a bit too thin because I have multiple brands, and I won't be satisfied unless I have multiple brands. I know that for a fact. I can't just focus on just one. Right now I am focusing more on this channel because I just know that this is going to be a more faster growth channel. I'm still working on gaming content. I'm still working on polymathy content and trying to work on the exercise book too, for example. So it's interesting to think about, like, I am splitting myself when it comes to that regard. But when it comes to the actual strategy in hand, there was times where I just needed to have the right tool, like Nuelink in order to disseminate it across platforms and syndicate things, or Opus clip to help chop things up. Like, I'm going to take this live stream right now, I'm recording it at the same time, so then I can take the same video and toss it into Opus clip and get maybe like 20-30 clips out of it, and then I can just post those across my socials. And right now I'm actually looking at 6 tabs that I need to go through and edit the clips that I want to make and put out. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to have a ton of clips scheduled ahead of time, and that's kind of the process that I've been doing lately. I've been approaching content and my actual own gym exercise too, workouts, in a more free-form pattern. I have a strategy in mind, I have a workout regimen, but I've been doing better and showing up more by just taking a little bit more of a free-form approach. I think that a lot of newer creators shouldn't do that because you need to have a bit more consistency in your own habits rather than just even on the public side of things. But in the end, as long as you show up, that's really what matters. And so this morning I went to the gym. I didn't have anything in mind. I have a workout regimen for the mornings, but I'm not going to even look at it. I'm just going to go ahead and see what feels sore. Let's try not to work out that too much. Let's find out what's not sore. Let's work out that more. What kind of content am I making this week? Okay, I'm scheduling out posts. That's great, but maybe I need to make a post on my other channel. And maybe I need to go ahead and focus on this project instead of this one. And right now, I noticed today that on my gaming shorts, it switched from one game to the next game, which means that I went through a decent amount of clips already posting those out. And this next game, which is now Zelda, it has a ton of clips, but probably only like 40 or 50 versus the 200 from the last game, which means that, like, I'm going to start running out of clips here soon, and I might need to start making more gaming content too. So I'm trying to balance it out and make sure I'm somewhat consistent across the channels. Maybe I could slow down the output of clips too. But I think that it's actually kind of helpful. I checked today my analytics. I have 2 new clipping channels, one for the PolyTools Creator Spotlight. That one's not doing that great. It only has like 1,000 views. But the other channel, the one that's about the Polymath podcast, it has like 15,000 views. Something like that. Maybe 16,000, something along those lines. And that's kind of crazy because it's a brand new channel. And it's only shorts right now. There's no like full regular videos on it. And then when it comes to my Polymathy channel, it's roughly 5,000 views. Nothing really is going out on that channel, my main personal brand channel. And then with the gaming channel, I was kind of surprised. Again, I'm only posting the clips. I think I did post 1 or 2 videos in the last month, but there was more of this off the cuff like this, talking about a video game. And on that channel, it has 30,000 views, which again, it's just so funny how these different niches can do so differently effectiveness-wise. And then this channel is about 15,000 views, which is kind of surprising to me. I thought it would be a little bit more since I've been posting at least 1 video a week. But, That happens sometimes, and maybe I need more shorts going out too. That's where a lot of these views kind of come from, but the views often lead a lot of traffic to the videos too. At this point, not sure what else I want to say. If anyone's watching, if you have a comment or questions or concerns, let me know. I started this live stream with the intention of just making a video, getting it out there, and really practicing the skill of live streaming. That's one of the areas that I lack, and I felt that, you just have to show up sometimes. And even if there's one viewer or 0 viewers and no one viewer like it was today, that's fine. People are lurkers. They generally don't always leave comments. That's okay. I'm here to help the content creators get better and accelerate their growth, and that's where I wanted to be. So thank you for being here, and have a good day.